Giant alligators. While films like Lake Placid, Alligator, and Rogue use gators and crocs as villains, I personally think the giant gator is a reference to the urban legend of the mutant sewer gators. These could be summoned by some sort of gator skin fashion article like a purse or a belt, or possibly a sewer manhole or lead pipe. Giant ant. The giant ant is a reference to Them, a sci-fi movie about, you guessed it, giant ants. We only see one single giant, so it's possible this could be a queen that births more and more ants during their sacrificial ritual, or maybe it just, controls many normal mortal ants psychically when it's unleashed. Or perhaps it's simply one ant of many, and all the other ants are in separate cubes. If it is but one single ant, it would still be a pretty formidable threat, as it has the ability to lift 10 times its own weight, and a set of creepy mandibles to chomp on anything and everything, and digging skills that could make a mole green with envy. The ant/ants may be summoned by an ant farm. Giant ape. This monster is basically just the equivalent of when you see those recolor OCs or traced anime characters, but for King Kong instead. It's likely he isn't quite the same gentle giant acting out of fear as Kong, instead using his immense strength to pummel humans and flatten skyscrapers. It's unknown if Sweden requires a similar summoning method to the US, but assuming they do, he may be summoned by a banana bunch or a tribal drum. Giant cat. These are basically just filler monsters, or maybe they're loosely based on the fear of cats. If you've ever seen a cat in action, you know they'll bite and scratch their victims to death, possibly toying with them in the same way that mortal cats do. They may be summoned by cat toys, a scratching post, a ball of twine, or maybe even some catnip. Giant crows. Despite the obvious filler nature of most giant animals, crows and ravens are a symbol of death and dark omens, perhaps most famously in Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. They may even be a tangential reference to the poem itself. The crow likely attacks by pecking and clawing humans, however, corvids are known to be capable of rudimentary tool use, while small crows and ravens employ a tactic of dropping nuts on rocks. This giant may do the same thing, but to people. The crow may be summoned by a crow feather quill or a birdcage. Giant deers. There's a lot of giant animals that are filler monsters here. Deers, despite their gentle reputation, are dangerous when provoked. Each equipped with 2 sharp antlers, these deers could easily charge and stab a person with little effort. Or, if their antlers are out of season, deers have an equally dangerous set of hooves to trample and buck threatening predators or meek sacrificial offerings. What else would summon these deer, other than a giant pair of antlers, I think? Giant ferrets. Once again, giant animal trope, you've heard it before. Ferrets are predatory animals that would likely have the same tactic of chasing and grappling prey to death. Like a fair number of the animal monsters, there's no clear origin. I'd speculate the item might be a plush ferret or a dead ferret, or possibly some sort of a ferret fur coat or something like a pest trap. Giant floating head. Many supernatural beings of great power are simply floating heads. The Beholder from Dungeons & Dragons, the Wizard of Oz, the Thing from Zardoz, the Psychic from Disney's Haunted Mansion, to give a few diverse array of examples. However, the head is played by the head creature designer, Dave Anderson, so he may have just used himself as a simple filler monster. Like I've said before and will say again, there's a shit ton of cubes. Nonetheless, the head may use telekinesis to wreak havoc on mankind, or just chomp them like a giant Pac-Man. He could be summoned by a guillotine, a large hat or piece of headwear, a bobblehead, or even perhaps a set of earrings like the one that Dave Anderson is wearing when he plays the head. Giant centipedes, millipedes, and insects. These are 3 distinct species of monster that are set loose by 3 separate items, but because of their similarities, I've just decided to group them together. These 3 filler species are based on the numerous invertebrate horrors of the big screen, like Mothra, the Fly, Mimic, or the aliens from Starship Troopers. These 3 species likely use venom, camouflage, and striking pincers and limbs to attack. I don't know what would summon millipedes and centipedes, but the giant spiny leaf insects, native to Australia, may be summoned by twigs or leaves, or maybe even a didgeridoo, as like I said, they're native to Australia. Giant lizard. A possible reference to The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which features a large stop-motion lizard destroying a miniature town. This could also be a very budget way to reference the dinosaurs from Jurassic Park, or a much more expensive way to reference the Slurposaurs from 1 million BC. A Slurposaur is a live-action lizard that has a bunch of crappy prosthetics on it, and then it destroys some miniatures. It may be summoned by some kind of a Stone Age tool or artwork. Giant owls, yet another filler monster. Owls are known to be swift predators that swoop out of trees and try to snatch things off the ground. Due to their association with the goddess Athena, the owls may be summoned by a Greek vase or a Gregorian depiction of owls. Or, maybe just owl pellets or owl remains. Giant snake. Snakes are a common phobia and have been the villains in a great many movies, notably the Anaconda franchise and Snakes on a Plane. Giant snakes are just as common in more fantastic stories. For example, Harry Potter 2's Basilisk comes to mind, Jafar from Aladdin transforms into a giant cobra, or even on the on-the-nose sci-fi movie, Megasnake. The giant snake doesn't appear to be any one particular species, as it sports cobra flaps and a rattlesnake rattle, something which doesn't occur in nature on both things. It likely kills people with a complete arsenal of serpentine attacks. Strangulation, venom, swallowing, and possibly even hypnosis, but that's a snake myth. It's possibly summoned by a snake skin or a snake charmer piece of equipment, or maybe even snake oil. Giant tarantula. Excluding spiders from the facility would have been an insult to horror. Spiders have populated movies and culture as an unsettling predator, from literature like A True Story, Lord of the Rings, and the Harry Potter franchise, to movies like Tarantula, Earth vs. Spider, and even The Son of Godzilla, all feature enormous man-eating spiders. But frankly, the zeitgeist of fear surrounding these things speaks for itself. This giant spider may use a combination of spider attacks, such as using webs as traps or nets, or even just for acrobatic maneuvers, kind of like Spider-Man. Could use venom, might even do that gross little hair thing that tarantulas do to discombobulate and irritate predators, but God, imagine it doing that to you. The spider might be summoned by a web, or maybe even a sewing machine if you wanted to get a little more creative. Giant toad. Assuming this one is more than just a filler monster, it could be a concept on the biblical plague of frogs from the Book of Exodus. Could also be a reference to the film Frogs from 1972. These toads may be equipped with some kind of horrible poison in their skin, though this only appears in mortal frogs with an aposematic coloring pattern, and this toad doesn't have that. And it may use its tongue for combat. These may be summoned by a lily pad or some kind of ornamental pond. Giant woman. Based on Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, this giantess may have the personality and demeanor of an emotionally unstable scorned woman, like the 50s movie, rather than some snarling, thuggish beast. Slapping instead of crushing, for example, maybe shrieking and crying instead of a fearsome roar. She may even feign innocence before killing archetypes, who knows?
You want died like last men visit Amazonia?
What'd they die of?
Crushed pelvises.
She may be summoned with a small UFO, as a UFO crash is what transforms the character Nancy Archer in the first place, or it could be like some giant girl stuff like a big can of Tab. The Giant of Cabin Lore carries a large club which unlikely bashes its prey to death, possibly eating the ground remains. Ground my bones. The giant may be summoned by magic beans, a club, an oversized article of clothing, or otherwise large object. Perhaps even a golden goose or egg, or the enchanted harp from Jack and the Beanstalk might have summoned him. Gorilla. We've already mentioned King Kong as the inspiration for the giant ape, so I'll instead speak about movies featuring ordinary-sized apes as antagonists. Movies like Planet of the Apes, Night of the Bloody Apes, and Congo. These killer gorillas sport incredible strength and climbing power. They may also be capable of sign language, but there's nothing to indicate this. This is just a hunch of mine, They're super apes. They can do anything a gorilla can do, Rituals with these gorillas may involve the beasts sparing and befriending the virgin, a similar way to how King Kong befriends Anne Darrow. They may be summoned by a monkey with cymbals, a monkey's paw, or maybe even a tire swing. Hell Lord. Wearing his inspiration plainly on his sleeve, Hell Lord, credited as Fornicus Lord of Bondage, and his Hell Minions are references to Pinhead and the Cenobites from the Hellraiser franchise. Hell Lord kills and tortures his victims with BDS-themed weapons such as chains and whips, possibly even using the powers to control them telekinetically. The three of them may have worshipped the Ancient Ones in some similar way to the Cenobites worshipped the Leviathan, maybe, maybe not. Hell Lord is summoned by solving the puzzle sphere. The Humanoid. To be perfectly honest, there isn't much to find out about this creature, and even the wiki entry is pretty sparse on details. But it may be a reference to the film The Humanoid from 1979 about a mad scientist turning people into superhuman soldier slaves. Or it could be Humanoids from the Deep from 1980. However, it could also be some kind of an anthropomorphic alien or animal or homunculus or even just an android. It could basically just be anything that's kind of just human-shaped or resembling that of a human. It could be summoned by a Vitruvian Man diagram or some kind of human anatomy figure, but your guess is as good as mine. If you've spotted this humanoid in the movie, feel free to let us know in the comments section. The Huron. Apologies for the pronunciation. When I first saw this, I thought it was going to be like a take on the whole Native American burial ground trope. However, the concept was a play on stereotypes of savage natives, a common fare of xenophobic settlers in the US. This is a much older trope that I didn't have a good handle on, so if you know a movie that kind of uses this trope, feel free to drop it in the comments and point it out for us. The Huron is seen scalping its victims with a large knife, but may have other primitive weapons like a bow and arrow, and likely doesn't boast any supernatural powers. The Huron is summoned by banging a tribal drum. Jack-o'-lanterns. Jack-o'-lanterns are a common Jack-o'-lanterns are a common icon of the Halloween holiday. A hollow pumpkin with a grim expression carved into the rind, and a candle in the center. The creature itself may also have been inspired loosely by Pumpkinhead, plus several interpretations of the Headless Horseman also have the
Or the several interpretations of the Headless Horseman.
or even just the original legend of Jack-o'-lantern. It can breathe fire, and this is its preferred method of killing.
Jack-o'-lantern is likely summoned by lighting a pumpkin. Other items may be a plastic trick-or-treat bucket, or even a jack-o'-lantern made of a turnip, which is the traditional style.